Hello and happy Thursday, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary number 133. As part of the racism rework, we are getting the Indian caste system, not caste system, as everyone corrected me. We are going to be going over that, which is a unique law that, as we will discover later, is only present for India. So you can only make use of this law for India, which is kind of a little bit of a twofer. We'll talk about that when we get there, but let's jump right in. Hello and happy Thursday. Big happy, big nice. Also, very happy news at the end of the Dev Diary. So stay tuned for that. I almost said taste tuned, but taste tuned as well. Welcome to the first narrative design Dev Diary. Today we will be going through the British Indian caste system and social hierarchies, hosted by M. But first, a word for Shaboom. So here we are going to get three hellos. We're going to get a hello here. We're going to get, well, okay, this isn't a hello, but it's a hey everyone with a capitalized everyone, because it's a holiday. Hey everyone. Although happy is not capitalized on Thursday, big sad. Hey everyone, my name is Shabham. Apologies for all the pronunciations. I'm not very familiar with how to pronounce Indian words, so forgive me as I will butcher every single one of these. I'm a narrative designer and history nerd from India, and I had the pleasure of working on the upcoming Pivot of Empires immersion pack. There are a lot of cool new systems, journal entries and events, and art coming your way, and honestly, I'm very excited by all of them. But the Dev Diaries can't be book length. Unfortunately, we would prefer this. I will try and focus on some of the really big points. The first and foremost is the caste system, which is accompanied by the discrimination rework. Woo! And also uses social hierarchies, and we'll get into that later, which is a very cool thing, because there's going to be a distinction between class and social hierarchy, or we're going to get into that later. But I'll focus on the history of the subject as we try to capture it with implementation. You will see that the caste system is labeled as the British Indian caste system in game. That is because the modern understanding of caste with and without India is very much a colonial creation, because India was not fully unified before, although the Mughals maybe disagree with that. Before the Indian subcontinent was consolidated under British colonial rule, the Hindu identity was fragmented. So while casteism was very much practiced then, it had greater variance and malleability. It was not legally enforced to the same extent across the nation, partially because there was no singular power that could enforce it, but also partially because different places had different beliefs around its relevance. I had no idea that it was the British that really turned the screws on the caste system, and I think that this is kind of interesting, although we don't get the full description here because you can't write a book. However, after colonization, in an effort to streamline administration, the British conducted a census and tried to give a fixed value to the caste. As this process happened, the caste became more codified and simplified. It became solely based on the Varna system and was no longer allowed for any change in status. So everyone is locked in. The Varna system recognizes only 4 castes and a 5th outside caste. It also gives the social roles to each tier. The Brahmins are meant to be teachers and priests. The Kshatriyas are meant to be warriors and leaders. The Vaishyas are merchant and traders. The Shudras are peasants, and the outcasts are offered no name, are simply considered untouchable. The Portuguese later used the term Dalit to describe them, and that became their caste name. However, as understood by the British, the Varna system ignored the Jati, which is also part of caste. Jati ranges for hundreds, if not thousands. This resulted in a rigid system that deepened social divides and made social mobility nearly impossible. I wonder to what extent that was advantageous for the British Empire, because I assume it had to have been advantageous for them historically, but okay. A lot of effort was made to capture this complex reality in game. We also consider using different labels for tiers in the caste system. As Dalits are the most oppressed by the system, we thought to make it a two-tier system consisting of Savarna and Avarna, those belonging to the Varna castes and those outside of it. However, this erased the oppression faced by the Shudras and other higher castes. Not to mention the role every tier of caste played in oppressing those immediately beneath them. Which, the way they've handled this, I think is really interesting, is there's a maximum and minimum acceptance value for all these castes. And as we'll see in a minute, you cannot get more acceptance than the caste above you, which is tremendously kind of interesting as an implementation. We wanted to capture some of the nuance and complexity of the Hindu identities of the period, as well as the oppressive, contradictory, and self-cannibalizing nature of the caste system. Yeah, is it progress if the cannibals use knife and fork? Comment below. The other type that I want to discuss is the Indian independence movement. The Indian independence movement had many leaders and many different factions. Furthermore, nearly all of them didn't demand independence. This I also found was pretty interesting. At first, the exploitation of resources and people continued under the British Raj. Discontent pushed those with the privilege, money, land, and education to demand better laws and governance. So laws and governance rather than full-fledged independence. The British Empire could have maybe held it together if they, cooperated, although maybe not. I read this book called Age of Anger, which is a bit interesting. I'm a bit far removed from it, so it's a bit hard to describe, but in it they talk about how generally just the relationship of colonization, even if being colonized provides some advantages that are technological, the nature of the relationship necessarily breeds resentment, no matter what is going on, and there will always eventually be a desire to be free from the yoke, even if they were treated well, although I use well loosely because, history. Many leaders at this time were happy to let the British Empire rule as long as they were allowed to govern themselves with more dignity. It was only when these efforts repeatedly failed that people were radicalized into starting revolution. And so some people view this radicalization as necessary and some view it as contingent. The game captures this through the journal entries around the Home Rule and Indian independence. But as you will see, many factions affect your ability to complete either journal entry. And this is interesting. We now have, I think that for most journal entries, it kind of really feels like a one-track type of thing. You can either, choose one thing or the other. An exception of which is Brazil has a journal entry where you can either go, for the monarchy and keeping Pedro around, or you can go towards the landowners. Most of the journal entries are just kind of one track, and here we get a two-track journal entry, which is pretty nice for flavor, and on top of that, laws being unique to a specific country is also an interesting little bit of flavor, and the more you make countries unique, in general, the more replayability you give to the game. One problem with this for Victoria 3 is one of the design philosophies for the game is not giving countries unique modifiers. They've actively wanted to not do this, or they've said that they want to not do this, and making the game as sandboxy as possible. And when you do these two things, every single country plays the same. And some of the flavor, like the inclusion of a caste law, no matter what is happening, might make the gameplay patterns for playing the EIC significantly different, or one of the Indian princes significantly different, and this gives replayability, and this is exciting. And so whenever we get stuff where we're also having options for what we're moving towards, in this case, Home Rule or Indian independence, this is also exciting because it increases replayability. And if there are reasons to go each of these, if one of these is strictly better than the other, then it's oh, okay. But if, for example, if you're playing the US and the American Civil War pops, there's this very significant reason to want the Union to win, which is that you can get African American as a primary culture, which is super advantageous and super meta, so there's not much reason to play the Confederacy. I hope that if there are any bonuses associated with, kind of each of these tracks, that there's reasons to do either one, and that there's maybe some level of balance, even if it's ahistoric, for the purpose of replayability. But we digress. But as you see, many factions affect your ability to complete either journal entry. This is because they were not always aligned, even when the various leaders agreed that their independence was the only way forward. Indeed, the division sowed by the British and resultant from the complex history of the subcontinent made it so that factors were fighting each other just as much as they were fighting the British. Three figures really came into tension. I'm hoping we get I'm assuming we get agitators for them. I'm hoping we get a ton of Indian agitators. That'll be sweet. We get Muhammad Ali Jinnah, again, apologies for all pronunciations, leader of the Muslim League and founder of the Pakistan. We get Mohandas Gandhi. I thought it was Mahanda, not Mahand. Oh, whatever. We get Gandhi, leader of the Indian National Congress movement and the founding father of India, and Periyar, founder of the self-respect movement. We do love ourselves some self-respect. Everyone give yourselves a pat on the back. And unless you don't deserve it, and leader of the Dravidian movement. Okay, Gandhi initially believed that that to be truly free, India needed to return to its Hindu roots and reject all British imposition. The sacred Jinnah, who thought that this line of thinking would be terrible for Indian Muslim minority. This or scared Jinnah. Which is definitely understandable, and part of why Pakistan broke away from India, as far as I remember from history, although my knowledge of history of the region is not very good. Despite being quite secular himself, Jinnah would often find himself campaigning for the needs of Muslims, lest Gandhi and the rest of the INC forgetting about them. This often put the two parties and two leaders at loggerheads, a matter that would eventually result in the partition. So this is my understanding. This is the separation of India and Pakistan. In returning to the Hindu roots, if returning to the Hindu roots upset Jinnah, it also worried people like Periyar. He had initially been part of the INC. As a low caste man, he feared the INC leading India, and most of the leadership were high caste and often callous towards the need of the lower caste people. Thus, Periyar and Jinnah usually tried to negotiate, argue, and even cooperate with the British, even if it weakened Gandhi and the INC's stance. And this is super fascinating, and if they can capture this in game with a variety of agitators and movements and this type of stuff, this will be super sweet. We don't really know how this is going to work too well, because it's going to be, I assume that the flavor is going to be filtered through, like much flavor is, or much flavor is actually filtered out, shout out to Sediment, filtered through kind of the lens of their rework for, cultural movements and this type of thing. And so, if depending on how the cultural movement or the agitation, depending on how this works, is probably going to inform how this feels. And we don't really necessarily have that great an idea yet. To Jinnah and Periyar, it was an opportunity to be heard. Historically, Gandhi did also become more cognizant of the needs of lower caste and Muslim people, but he and the INC also had to support the staunch conservatives, Hindus, such as Hindu Mahasabha. It was always a compromised position. If you try and build an independent Indian game, hopefully you will feel how the game pushes and pulls you. And this is, we hope that this is kind of, we get a little bit of a flavorful minigame as it relates to playing the EIC. Okay, lastly, I want to wish you a happy Thursday, because even though the person who came before me in this dev diary wished you a happy Thursday, we want to wish you a happy Thursday as well. But apparently he misspelled this portion, and he said, I want to talk about the Sikh Empire, but okay, we'll talk about the Sikh Empire. The Sikh Empire was in a precarious position in 1836. They have the Afghans on one side and the British to the south. Their leader, Ranjit Singh, established the first Sikh Empire, but with one too many heirs. We hate when that happens. Shout out to getting rid of the firstborn child, as one does. When he passes away, a series of successions occur that are violent and sometimes comical. Integrating the narrative of Sikh Empire was a lot of fun, and it felt like writing a season of Game of Thrones. This will be sick if we get all that flavor. Take us to Flavor Town, please. I hope you have a good time going through these events, as ridiculous as they are compelling. Ridiculous. The back of your head. Alright, and here we get a second hello. So this is our third hello. Hello, I'm M. This is the same M, I believe, that introduced themselves here, that wished us a happy Thursday. Oh no, wait, hosted by M? Wait, we got a hello from Volpecta, a hello from Shubham, or a hey everyone, and now a hello from M. Okay, one of the game designers in Victoria 3 that specializes in narrative. This is my first development diary. Is it really? I feel like I've heard M talk before, but okay. And I'm excited to share a bit more with what to expect with 1.8 Pivot and Pivot of Empire. Today, I'll be primarily walking through a couple things we've been working on, namely social hierarchies in the British Indian caste system and the new law group associated with the caste system. So, the British Indian caste system has been designed alongside the cultural and religious acceptance rework that Lino, I just realized that I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce Lino or Lino's name. The truth hurts. Spoke about a few weeks back. To represent this, we're introducing the mechanics for social hierarchies and social classes to the game. The British Indian caste system is a social hierarchy that makes use of social classes in order to represent its effect. So, there is kind of a separation from currently there's just, well, we'll get into their explanation, but a social hierarchy is combined with two more social classes. All pops belong to a social hierarchy. Any pops not targeted by country-specific social hierarchy, in this case British India, are organized into base hierarchies, lower, middle, and upper class based on profession. And so this is kind of, as we understand the game now, which correspond to lower, middle, and upper strata respectively. So this is how we understand kind of status now, and it's entirely economic, and it is based on profession. Or not entirely economic, it's profession-based. Shopkeepers can be considerably richer than other pops. I believe shopkeepers are lower class, but they can be considerably richer if they are ownership shopkeepers. And here we have social class. Each pop belongs to a social class, and each social class belongs to lower strata, middle strata, or upper strata. A pop's social class is determined by the country's social hierarchy. And so this social hierarchy will effectively overwrite what we understand to be the base condition. And this is interesting. I don't know how many social classes they're going to change country to country. We just know for sure they're going to change India. Previously, pops were distributed by profession in the lower, middle, and upper strata. This was fairly rigid and meant that the previous system couldn't enable culture or country-specific strata. So this is what we're receiving, is culture and country-specific strata. Academics could only ever be in the middle strata. Clerks can only ever be in the lower strata. Social hierarchies are being introduced to the game to affect some of the previously one-dimensionality, where the social ranking of professions might differ in different parts of the world to allow for the implementation of the British Indian caste system, which this should be pretty nice for modding as well, if you want to have, a culture that venerates, like if you were wanting to mod in the Mongols or something, or a warrior society, then you would maybe want, officers and servicemen, or officers to be the highest class, the upper strata, and servicemen to be middle strata. And this is an adjustment you could make if you were trying to mod in a warrior society. To understand a little bit better, let's take a look at how this has happened, how it looks today. Here's how the distribution of pops by profession across lower, middle, and upper strata has appeared previously. So we have this, which is kind of, I guess we're looking at the population distribution, but they're not showing us the professions. An overview of population where you can see upper, lower, middle strata. Clerks, laborers, machinists, peasants, oh my. Servicemen and slaves are lower strata. Academics, bureaucrats, clergymen, engineers, farmers, officers, and shopkeepers are middle strata. Notably in this, clergymen and shopkeepers can be ownership class in the middle strata, and so they can sometimes have income that isn't quite as good as the ownership class, but, well, it's not quite as good as capitalists, but it could actually be better. They can actually be richer than landowners in a lot of cases. Aristocrats and Aristocrats and capitalists are upper strata. Pops are still distributed as they have been by professions above, but now the base hierarchy is that they will be distributed into lower, middle, and upper classes. So we have, this is our strata, and if you are operating in a country that just uses the base values, you will get 3 classes that correspond to what was previously kind of the strata, which is the lower strata class, which is fairly straightforward, middle strata, upper strata, and they all have the exact same kind of constituent groups that were previously in there. Screenshot of classes tab in society, where you can see the lower class, middle class, etc., mostly etc. Pops pops part of the base hierarchy are assigned social class based on their professions as they had been before. Every pop has a social class, and that social class belongs to a strata. Now, what's interesting to me here is they're going to talk about it in just a sec, but it seems to be the case that you could separate this and bifurcate this based on religion, which is very fascinating and can lead to a lot of granularity or modding that can be very cool. We'll see exactly how that shakes out. Social classes can be defined based on a combination of pop type, primary culture, and or religion. So if we can make it so that not intelligentsia, only academics from a particular religion get the upper class, we can get some level of granularity where certain academics are going to be upper class and certain ones aren't. I can't think of a condition where this is especially useful, but this allows for really, really kind of granular things. I'm excited to see what modders do with this type of stuff. I'm excited to see if anyone else is going to have way different social classes other than India. Social classes information will appear in the society panel. Social hierarchies are intended to affect all kinds of pops with modability in mind, and can be linked to a new law group or a law group. This brings us to our example of how we are diverging, which is the British Indian caste system. Since Shubham's given a bit of the historical and cultural context, I'll dive in with how it looks in game. And we see the middle, upper, and lower strata again, but now our classes are not, lower class, middle class, upper class. Instead, our classes are Shudras, Dalit, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the only one I feel good about the pronunciation, and we see that this is different. Right, we see that the capitalists and aristocrats are now in the middle strata, up above the kind of lower class middle strata, and we see the Shudras are in the lower class here, up above the Dalit, which is the lowest of the low classes. And notably, I don't think, are farmers middle strata normally? I can't remember. Okay, they are. Fair enough. But we see the elevation of pops that are not normally upper strata into upper strata because they are going to be maximally accepted. And this is going to have a huge impact on qualifications. This rework might make qualifications easier for the EIC, which has always kind of been their struggling point. But we'll kind of read through. I think that's a gameplay thing where we're going to have to figure out how they feel. But one of the things that kind of sucks about playing the EIC is if you recruiting up officers takes forever, because you only accept English pops in the current version of the game, and so it's really hard to get qualifications for officers. The British Indian caste system recategorizes the pop strata differently from the base hierarchy. The British Indian caste system specifically encompasses all pops that are Hindu and have the South African heritage cultural traits. So, if you have an English pop, right, that is a capitalist in this country, they will still be part of the upper strata, as far as I understand. Which is going to lead to, the lower, middle, and upper strata looking a bit different, because in India, if you are having capitalists and aristocrats that are Indian or Hindu, then your middle strata, if you're playing the EIC, will probably be your richest strata, which is kind of interesting. Other pops that do not have Hindu and are not part of the Southeastern heritage cultural trait will default to the existing lower, middle, upper classes of the base hierarchy. So where is the British Indian caste system found? How is it set? The caste system will be set from game start in the British East India Company and the princely states. Otherwise, it will appear in game with the following criteria. A country is the subject of Great Britain. A country's primary culture has the South Asian cultural trait. More than 50% of the population is Hindu, which means we're only going to get the caste system for India. You cannot, implement the caste system in China. I don't think you can get Southeast Asian heritage cultural trait. I think that you could be like Dainam and become a British subject intentionally and then get the caste system. something like this, maybe, which might be an interesting playthrough. But okay. If a percentage of pops in a country is, with the British Indian caste system, drops to 10% or below, the caste system disappears and is fully replaced with the base hierarchy. Which is kind of interesting in that you could intentionally, I guess, feed away your states and then take a bunch of Chinese states and then get rid of the caste system. Although, if you reacquired the states and had more than 50% Hindu, you'd suddenly, be back on it. Back on your bullshit. Okay. Tied to the caste system is the caste hegemony law group that will appear under power structure. This law group is specific to the British Indian caste system. As such, the law only applies to countries where the British Indian caste system is active. This will be the first time a law group is regional or cultural specific, and this ability to have laws be regionally and culturally specific is, one, interesting, but two, this is really big for modding because, or it's really big for modding and flavor because if we want to have flavor that is unique to individual countries, this is one way it can be introduced by a specific law. And so I think that the development team has realized that kind of some of their design philosophy of wanting to be sandboxy they probably realized this before, but the design philosophy of wanting to be sandboxy and not wanting to give specific bonuses to specific countries is antagonistic with the idea of local flavor and replayability. You can't have your cake and eat it too, unless you're Marie Antoinette, in which case you just eat the cake. But it's and then you get promptly we're not going to behead any devs, but let them eat cake. The system is, the design philosophy is antagonistic towards this two things that are good from a gameplay perspective, even if the design philosophy comports probably better with being, one, more politically correct, because as you get closer to modernity, applying country and cultural specific bonuses becomes more and more offensive, right? But also two, it's probably a better simulation because if one country just does what another country does, they probably should be just about as good as it, I would think. Maybe not. You have to start saying stuff about countries and cultures that's maybe not okay to say, but the caste system is going to be kind of our first glimpse at it is going to be our first glimpse at a law that is specific, and it'll be interesting to see if other laws kind of come in and add texture to different runs, because if the caste system causes us to play much differently on the EIC than we do other countries, and come to creative decision points, and this is from a gameplay perspective, this is what becomes important, is if we have decision points that are unique to having this law system, then that makes the game more interesting and fun and more replayable, because if we have a different country that has a different sort of unique law, then that will also further, so for example, it would not be unreasonable for the UK to have corn laws or something like this as a unique law group or a unique part of import-export, rather than having it be a journal entry. And so and you could put them on Game Start or what have you, and this would be a way of introducing local flavor that isn't directly giving a country a bonus, but giving them access to a law that will have specific effects that only their country can activate. I don't know. This is like a huge thing when it comes to modding, and it's not extraordinarily exciting necessarily for India specifically, but both in terms of game development and modding, I think that this has far-reaching implications, and so it's interesting to see this kind of unique law group thing being implemented, as it were. Also, on the subject of unique bonuses, we saw Afghanistan get a unique bonus, Circassia get a unique bonus. Afghanistan, if you do some of their journal entries, you get 5%. Government dividends efficiency. I think you get 5% company throughput on Circassia if you complete all their stuff. And this is just permanent, so it's just a country bonus effectively. But I think that they're more okay with doing those type of countrywide bonuses on specific on really small countries specifically, which is interesting for Circassia, because Circassia might actually be the best country for endgame global GDP if you just do a world conquest on Circassia. I don't know. That's discussion for another time. China, starting as China and trying to maximize global GDP might also be better. And you also get the sericulture law. Okay, or not law, tech. There are 4 laws in the caste hegemony group. The caste system enforced, caste system codified, caste system not enforced, and affirmative action. The new laws affect the flow of social mobility via qualification gain, acceptance, and or education access. And this is going to be kind of big because this is going to deeply affect what has previously been kind of what's unique about the EIC, which is that like everyone's discriminated against. Now the discrimination is going to be more granular, and you're going to have some groups that aren't that discriminated against. Where the caste system enforced and the caste system codified laws are more a reflection of 19th century British Raj, affirmative action is designed to be a reflection of the early days of reservation laws in the earliest 20th century. All countries that start with a caste system or gain it from pop criteria will be active with caste not enforced. All countries that start with a caste system, they'll be start with caste system not enforced, which as you can see, plus 80 minimum acceptance for upper strata, which is interesting because this means now your guys who belong to the Brahmin group, if they are Hindu, even though Hindu is not accepted in the EIC, right, under kind of current in-game laws, this plus 80 is pretty accepted. This is going to be the floor. They will always be plus 80. So this means that you can easily get qualifications for, intelligentsia pops, or not intelligentsia pops, academics. However, they have to specifically come from that class. So now you're going to have a tension where, you're going to be searching for qualifications, and qualifications will be easier, but only if they're coming from the group that's already there. So we can only really promote clergy to academics really easy, bureaucrats to academics really easy, and kind of like all this type of stuff, and promoting across strata is incredibly difficult, which means that you really can't de-peasant very easily unless you're de-peasanting to laborers or machinists or servicemen, because the lower strata will have difficulty moving up to the upper strata. And so I don't know exactly how this is going to play in game, but the fact that you're kind of locked in to your lane is going to be very interesting. So we see also modifiers, cultural acceptance for lower strata in terms of specifics, so they get less cultural acceptance for middle strata, and this is where it's not enforced, so they're not as railroaded, but we're going to see a screenshot in a second where they are more railroaded. Effects in this law group only apply to pops that are part of the caste system, so it's not going to apply to the English pops. For example, the work in progress screenshot, the upper strata pops in this caste system, the Brahmins have a minimum accepted value of 80. This minimum accepted value does not apply across all upper strata pops, such as capitalists and aristocrats that are not part of the caste. It will only apply to Brahmins. So you will not have the English getting automatically that plus 80. We see full acceptance. As Brahmins, acceptance cannot go below 80, so they will always be fully accepted. They will always have base acceptance, or their acceptance here is a floor, so even though they're not receiving as enough points for acceptance, they will just be at 80 either way. Next lower is second-class citizen at 79 acceptance. We get plus political strength and plus wages for the full acceptance status, and this is work in progress, but okay. Other laws in the caste system will have more acceptance and qualification growth effects that are specifically applied to pops in the caste system. Here in the caste system codified, we have an example of other types of effects you can expect, and this one is interesting in that, okay, the first thing that I found very striking is we have the minimum value for upper strata, and then for minimum strata, we have the maximum acceptance value, which I don't think the maximum value is anywhere else. So this means that no matter what, if you are in the middle strata, you cannot break up. You cannot become more accepted. But all this also means that you're going to have a high level of acceptance on all the Indian pops that were previously purely discriminated, because the upper strata will all be fully discriminated, or I mean fully accepted. The middle strata will be kind of second-class citizens, but there's a minimum, there's a floor for middle class, and so you will not be getting a bunch of radicals from discrimination in India because they have a unique system that allows them to have primary culture be English and still not have massive levels of the discrimination for their pops. We see qualification growth for lower strata in country-specific hierarchy, minus qualifications for middle strata in country-specific hierarchy, and then we see intra-class qualification growth for lower strata and all these other stratas, which is amazing, or maybe not amazing, that's probably the wrong word for it, but this really captures how, if you do the codified system, you will be really super railroaded. This has an advantage of lowering bureaucracy population cost modifier, so I think this is why you would do it, because otherwise, the just not enforced looks better. But if you do this, you can put in more institutions more easily, because you are going to be having to pay a lot of bureaucracy for population if you're playing EIC. So, right, more than what's coming from your institutions. And so this is, or cost multiplier. Actually, does this decrease the amount you pay for each institution by 15%? If this is multipliers getting applied, that's a pretty big deal. So you have an incentive for using this law, but it is going to lock pops in, and they won't, they'll have, their difficulty in promoting to certain groups will be different. In particular, I think you really care about, this group, which is that you're probably going to have a hard time populating the Kshatriyas in particular, which is interesting because this is going to make it so that maybe you really kind of want to sell your buildings to Great Britain. I mean, you probably don't, but if you can't employ up specifically this strata, is going to be hard to really grow out that much, I think. But then the Brahmins, there's not a lot in here. There's only 270k, 187k. Really, most of them are in the upper strata, and if these guys can't promote very easily, if they're railroaded in, maybe it's not worth doing this for the decreased bureaucracy cost. But this is, the entire point of all this is that this is a decision to be made. This is something to analyze. This is something to think about, and it might be the case that early on, you want to just stay on this caste system that is not enforced, and then as you can grow different groups such that they can grow on their own and you can get qualifications sufficiently, maybe you move up to a higher caste system, which means that EIC will have decision points that they've not previously had. We see this is a work in progress. We're working on improving readability and balancing effects of these laws, so don't get mad if this isn't what's in place. Here, the effects on landowners, political strength, and bureaucracy population cost multiplier, as well as effects on acceptance and qualification growth. Under the caste system law, codified law, the qualification growth will be vastly restricted between castes, limiting most social mobility between classes to varying degrees depending on the law's effect. Okay, we have cultural erasure, which is if we are below 59, which recall means you have to be in the lower strata. The upper or the middle strata has a floor of 59 or of 60, if I recall correctly, and so we're getting a little bit of a glimpse at, we see qualifications are decreased, wages are decreased, political strength is decreased, radicalism increases, and we see assimilation as well, and then we see this. If you are playing as the British East India Company or the British Raj, forms via the Indian Uprising journal entry, caste system codified will be activated if the caste system enforced or caste system codified isn't already part of your laws. The British Indian caste system and the caste hegemony law group, as well as the Indian Uprising journal entry rework, will be free as part of the 1.8 update. Woo! That's all for today. However, and this is the awesome news, we said in Pivot of Empires on Tuesday that we would have 2 dev diaries this week. We're actually liars because we're having 3. So the dream of a triple happy weekday is not yet dead. We can see another Dev Diary tomorrow, and in that, we might have the triple happy weekday. So tune in tomorrow with more about maps, culture, and more by Hansi. So this is fantastic news because we can get a happy Tuesday, the betrayal of the Tinto team not giving us a happy Wednesday, followed by this good news on a happy Thursday that we will be able to have potentially a happy Friday as well. So we could have even had a 4 happy week, but that's too much. That's hubris. Everyone's heard the tale of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. 3 happy days in a week? That's excellent news. 4 is hubris. But I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We're, of course, going to keep covering the Dev Diaries that are happy days. And other than that, have a happy Thursday. Oh, also, if you're watching this on Thursday, I will be streaming Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 Remake all day today, or planning on doing it for 12 hours, although since this Dev Diary is so long, it might start a little bit late. But, yeah, we'll be there. Bye-bye now.